Chapter 6, Confrontation. 3 days passed in a state of suspended animation. The Wheeler household maintained its routines. Meals were prepared and eaten, chores completed, polite conversations exchanged, but an undercurrent of tension ran beneath the surface of every interaction. Eyes constantly drifted to windows, ears strained for the sound of an approaching vehicle, and no one ventured far from the house alone. Zaph continued working at the computer shop in town, though he found himself checking his phone obsessively for messages from Sue, imagining worst-case scenarios with each hour that passed. He had created this situation, set these events in motion with careful deliberation, yet now found himself dreading the culmination of his own design. On the fourth day, around sunset, it happened. Zaph was returning from work, his ancient Honda kicking up dust on the long gravel driveway leading to the farmhouse, when he spotted the unfamiliar car parked beneath the oak tree at the edge of the property. His stomach dropped as recognition dawned. Ted's Camry, positioned just far enough from the house to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to maintain surveillance. He pulled alongside it, noting with growing unease that it was empty. Ted had already made his approach. Gravel crunched beneath Zaph's feet as he exited his car, scanning the area with heightened awareness. The farmhouse stood approximately 200 yards away, windows glowing amber in the fading light, appearing deceptively peaceful. But something felt wrong. A silence where there should have been movement, an emptiness to the yard that usually contained at least one family member tending to evening chores. Moving cautiously but quickly, Zaph approached the house, senses alert for any sign of disturbance. The front door stood slightly ajar, the first concrete indication that something was amiss. The Wheelers were careful people, not the type to leave doors open with night approaching. He paused on the porch, listening intently. Voices drifted from within, multiple conversations happening simultaneously, their tones urgent but controlled. Not the sounds of immediate danger, but of a situation balanced on a knife's edge. Zaph pushed the door open slowly, deliberately making enough noise to announce his presence without startling anyone inside. The conversation ceased abruptly, replaced by a weighted silence. The scene that greeted him in the living room was surreal in its calculated normality. Ted seated in what had become Zaph's usual chair, a cup of coffee held casually in his hands, as if he were a welcome guest rather than an intruder. Harold and Elaine occupied the sofa, their expressions revealing discomfort but not panic. Jason stood by the fireplace, his posture suggesting he'd positioned himself strategically between Ted and the rest of the room. Sue was nowhere to be seen. "Where is she?" Zaph asked, addressing the room at large, though his eyes remained fixed on Ted. "Upstairs," Jason answered before Ted could speak. "Taking a shower. She doesn't know he's here yet." Ted smiled, a thin, brittle thing that didn't reach his eyes. "Zaph, perfect timing. We were just having a nice chat about you." The casual malice in his voice sent a chill down Zaph's spine. This wasn't the unhinged Ted who had brandished a knife in a moment of blind rage. This was something potentially more dangerous. Ted in control, Ted with a plan. "You're violating the restraining order," Zaph said, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through his system. "You need to leave." Ted's smile widened fractionally. "Actually, I don't. The order specifies I can't come within 500 feet of Sue. As Jason helpfully informed me when I arrived, Sue is upstairs, well over 500 feet from where I'm currently sitting." He gestured to the living room entrance. "As long as I stay in this room and she stays upstairs, I'm within the letter of the law." The technicality was absurd, but Zaph recognized the dangerous logic behind it. Ted hadn't come to confront Sue directly. He'd come to speak with her family, to present his version of events without her contradictions. "What do you want, Ted?" Harold's question cut through the tension, direct and uncompromising. Ted set his coffee cup down carefully, the deliberateness of the movement belying the turmoil Zaph could sense beneath his controlled exterior. "I want my wife back. I want my life back." His gaze shifted to Zaph, hardening. "And I want him gone." "Sue's made her choice," Zaph said, moving further into the room, positioning himself where he could monitor both Ted and the stairway. "The divorce papers are filed. It's over." Ted's laugh was a harsh, brittle sound. "Is that what she told you?" That it's over. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You think you know her, but you don't. You think she cares about you, but she doesn't. She's using you, just like she used me. Zaph maintained his neutral expression, knowing Ted was lashing out blindly, searching for any vulnerability. Ted didn't realize that Zaph already knew everything. About Mike, about Sue's indiscretions while they played video games, about all of it. Mary had revealed everything before he'd sent her away. These weren't revelations. They were merely confirmations of the characters he was manipulating in his carefully orchestrated revenge. This isn't helping your case, Ted, Zaph said calmly, his voice carrying a hint of manufactured sympathy. You're just making yourself look desperate. Ted's face flushed darker. You smug little... He caught himself, struggling visibly to maintain control. You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into. Zaph almost smiled at the irony. It was Ted who had never understood what he'd gotten himself into from the very moment he'd suggested that fateful arrangement on New Year's Eve. I know what you're trying to do, Zaph said, his voice steady despite the internal calculations running through his mind. This won't work. You've lost, Ted. Ted's face flushed with anger. Lost? You think this is some kind of game? He stood abruptly, his coffee mug falling to the floor, dark liquid spreading across the worn carpet like blood. You orchestrated all of this. From the very beginning, New Year's Eve, you planned your revenge. The accusation hung in the air, uncomfortably close to the truth, but Zaph kept his expression neutral, even concerned. I think you need help, Ted. Really? Before Ted could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Sue appeared in the doorway, hair still damp from her shower, her expression freezing when she spotted Ted. What are you doing here? Her voice trembled despite her evident attempt to appear strong. Ted's demeanor changed instantly at the sight of Sue, something almost desperate crossing his features. Sue, listen to me. He's been manipulating both of us. This was all planned. You need to leave, Sue interrupted, moving to stand beside Zaph. Now! Ted's eyes darted between them, his desperation turning to fury. You still can't see it, can you? He wanted this, all of it. He sent Mary away, moved in with us, turned you against me. That's enough, Harold said, standing with the authority of a man who would brook no further disruption in his home. We're calling the sheriff. Ted's control finally snapped. No, you need to understand. His hand moved to his pocket, fumbling for something inside. He's got a weapon, Jason shouted, lunging forward to tackle Ted to the ground. What followed was chaos. Jason and Harold restraining a thrashing Ted, Elaine on the phone with the sheriff, Sue pressing herself against Zaph's side in fear. When Ted was finally subdued, what emerged from his pocket was not a weapon, but a small frame photo of him and Sue from happier days. The pathetic gesture only cemented the image of a man who had completely unraveled. The sheriff arrived quickly, and Ted's behavior deteriorated further. He ranted about conspiracies, about Zaph's manipulations, about how everyone had been turned against him. His words became increasingly incoherent as the deputies led him to the patrol car. He's having some kind of breakdown, the sheriff said, watching as Ted was secured in the back seat. With the restraining order violation and this behavior, he'll likely be held for quite some time. Sue leaned against Zaph as they watched the patrol car disappear down the driveway, Ted's face pressed against the window, still mouthing accusations no one could hear. I'm sorry you had to see that, Zaph said to the Wheeler family once the dust had settled. I never imagined he'd go this far. Harold placed a heavy hand on Zaph's shoulder. Not your fault, son. Some men just can't handle losing what they think belongs to them. Later that night, as the household settled back into an uneasy normalcy, Sue sought Zaph out in the privacy of his room. What Ted said, she began hesitantly, about you planning everything. Zaph pulled her close, kissing her forehead with calculated tenderness. Ted's created a narrative where he's not responsible for his own actions. It's easier for him to believe I masterminded some elaborate revenge than to accept that he lost you because of his own behavior. She nodded against his chest, accepting his explanation without further question. The sheriff called while you were in the shower. After the psychiatric evaluation, they're transferring Ted directly to the county jail. With the restraining order violation in his behavior, they're talking about a 6-month sentence, minimum. Zaph allowed himself a small smile, hidden in the darkness where Sue couldn't see it. 6 months during which Ted would lose his business, his home, his remaining dignity. 6 months for the divorce to proceed uncontested. Everything had gone according to plan. "I feel sorry for him," Sue murmured sleepily. "Despite everything." "I know. That's because you're a good person," Zaph replied, stroking her hair. "Try to sleep now. It's been a difficult day." After Sue drifted off, Zaph remained awake, his mind clear and focused as he mentally calculated his next steps. He'd accomplished everything he had set out to do. Mary was gone, Ted was destroyed, their comfortable lives shattered beyond repair. His revenge was complete. There was nothing left for him here. He gazed down at Sue's sleeping form. For a brief moment, something almost like regret flickered through him. She had been a useful tool in his revenge, and somewhere along the way, he'd grown almost fond of her. Almost. But attachments were dangerous things. Liabilities that could be exploited. He'd learned that lesson all too well. Before dawn, Zaph carefully extracted himself from Sue's embrace and packed his few belongings. He left a brief note on the nightstand, something about needing space to figure things out, about not being ready for another relationship so soon. The platitudes were hollow, but they would serve their purpose. He was driving away from the Wheeler farm as the first rays of sunlight crested the horizon, illuminating the dilapidated windmill in the yard like a solitary sentinel watching his departure. In the rearview mirror, the farmhouse grew smaller until it disappeared entirely, taking with it any last trace of the life he'd briefly inhabited there. A cold satisfaction settled in Zaph's chest as he merged onto the highway. Those who had deceived him, who had uprooted his life, had paid the price. Their lives lay in ruins while he drove away unscathed, free to begin again wherever he chose. The devil had won this dance, and now he was moving on to new partners, new games. Just another fresh start.